An American dream fantasy has manifested into a Stalinist-like hallucination of horror, with most Americans peacefully asleep. But intriguing arguments for homeschooling have begun sounding alarms. As early as 1795, a mere 19 years after the signing of the United States Declaration of Independence, history suggests the first of its kind arising in America, the day nursery. The concept spread across the nation for over a generation to follow, taking firm, now demonstratively permanent, roots by the mid-20th century. With reasonable and passionate arguments existing from the beginning both for and against, the idea of non-family members hired to assist in raising one's offspring is strongly debated, yet at the same time overwhelmingly accepted and utilized. There's no denying that it has developed into both a viable industry of employment as well as a tool of economic societal necessity, wherein a large portion of its participants are utterly dependent. Sure enough, what was right alongside this developing endeavor by the people to build and embrace childcare services? That's right, the political movements. They had their pompous proposals ready to suggest from the start. And it didn't take long for the tentacles of government to envelop the concept, inception, and complete control in execution of the entire operation. A prominently noted date in this chapter of history is September 9, 1889, when Jane Addams opened Hull House in Chicago. As touted by Jane Addams' HullHouse.org, Addams and Hull House led the progressive charge in Chicago and in the United States. The work of Hull House resulted in numerous labor union organizations, a labor museum, tenement codes, factory laws, child labor laws, adult education courses, cultural exchange groups, and the collection of neighborhood demographic data. Phew. Go back and read that with your Orwellian eye. From then on, politicians have exploited the welfare of children, working mothers, and middle to low-class families as a platform on which to run. Taxpayers have been misled, their heartstrings pulled for justification of their financial contribution to every useless committee X and bad policy Y. In what appears to now be a self-fulfilling prophecy of disaster, we have seen one political plight or reform after another, decade by decade, continually chop away at the good intentions of the child care industry and reduce it to mere kindling for the government's fire. Like most great ideas in America with honest and well-intentioned beginnings, this too has been hijacked, redesigned, and sold back to the public under fake, faulty, and downright destructive pretenses. And while this issue is a reality and threatening by itself, it's not the fundamental complication at hand that we need to be concerned about. Instead, the problem exists among those who have been deceived to believe that childcare services, these early learning centers, are there for the general good. Proper physical and social development, core education, safety, and overall well-being are lauded as priorities and foci at these establishments, and on the surface that sounds great. But as my nearly 6 years of first-hand experience working in such a center can attest, many of these schools are financially operating under practices overtly on par with corporate capitalism. It's similar to the business plans of chain retailers, or like running a big box warehouse. It's all about the money. In order to bring in the most profit, center directors are encouraged to operate with classrooms at government-regulated, maximum occupancies. Arbitrary child-teacher ratios put a single teacher in charge of an unreasonable number of young children or infants at a time. And more often than not, these federal and state limits are ignored or overlooked regardless, simply so the company won't have to pay out overtime or hire extra employees. Furthermore, enrollment and registration fees are subject to change without notice for any reason at any time, and a rise in fee does not mean an improvement in services, or anything for that matter. There are scripted answers to provide if asked, spouting resources on this, and often, the staff even goes through another re-education session to make it seem legit. But at my center, I saw the weekly cost of care increase at least thrice within 4 years. Afterward, the children experienced nothing systemically different. When I spoke with parents, they frequently voiced concerns over the matter, as they could see no real change either, other than the ebbing totals in their bank accounts. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, I endured a quality and value decline throughout my entire time working there. As the food specialist, their fancy term for professional can opener operator, I was set up for decided failure in offering real and honest nutrition to the children, and it worsened steadily. The curriculum, though no self-respecting, honest teacher with a working brain could label it as such, is more akin to totalitarian and/or Marxist literature, and favors multiculturalism over learning the alphabet or basic gross motor development. But wait, you say, my kid is going through the STEM program at daycare. That's a good curriculum, right? I mean, the Department of Education supports it, so it must be good. If that statement seems plausible to you, I suspect you aren't yet connecting with this information. We will analyze STEM another day. For now, let's identify the last big piece of this intricate childcare puzzle, the staff. The qualifications needed for one to gain employment inside the building where your children spend vast amounts of time are surprisingly minimal. Basically, so long as you don't have an existing record that can't clear the federal background check, you are cognizant that children exist on the planet, and you have a lack of disdain for such, then you will get in. One is immediately inundated with handbooks and training videos upon entry that focus on specific teaching styles and its best practices. All staff is required to actively promote, support, and demonstrate these techniques at all times. This includes, but is not limited to, the amount of time an infant spends eating and sitting in a high chair, delegations of which toys a child can choose to use for play, proper staff usage of STEPS tools, the subject matter during story time, and the appropriate, company-approved vernacular to be used for disciplining. Used for opportunities to improve behavior. The whole thing is on its face absurd. Single statements are read easily. The words appear straightforward and non-threatening at first glance. But to the untrained eye, or improperly functioning brain, as it were, all of these little measures work together to keep you not only distracted from but also at the behest of a seemingly darker purpose in progress. And some evidence suggests it's no accident the modern-day approach to childcare parallels various psychological studies involving cognitive manipulation. One night, at re-education camp, known as staff meetings or training sessions to you, we were told we could no longer use the word no when stopping or improving upon undesired behavior, and that we should rephrase statements like don't bite your friends into teeth are used for chewing our food. Did you catch that? Don't be distracted by the qualifier now being used as a rule. They basically told us, don't use don't. No saying no. Many of my peers dutifully tried to suppress instinctual reactions and instead recite the lines given, but it wasn't very successful. Try it for yourself. Whenever life requires you to give a negative command or explain why or how not to do something, pause to manipulate your delivery and distort your intended point on delivery in real-time situations. Let me know how well that works for you. Fast forward 8 months or so of unsuccessful habituation, and ultimately, non-compliance by staff, and this tactic was reintroduced. The training had been modified to make one believe that any difficulties one had in the past were due to their own inability to communicate properly with the children. But now, we have the new studies to show you that it is possible, and we've invested in new technological solutions that walk you through the process. You, in turn, record your findings and observations upon application of these techniques. Then you can be further coached as you explore different possible solutions in communicating until you successfully get through to the child. And such a gift we have with records that are tailored to individual children's needs during difficult and emotional situations, resulting in a future where all undesired behavior can be purposefully and successfully redirected to take on a more desired one. Believe me, I wish I was making this up. Simply put, it can be described as Orwellian, and for the sake of remaining civil, for now, so shall it be.
Hey! Goodbye!